one thing that came up again and again was the novel, which was troubling all of you. Many questions coming up, whether we should read the novel or the summary is enough, what to do, what not to do. So we planned this session for the novel, The Invisible Man, for all of you. After that, we'll try uploading the video related to the writing section, because writing section and note making from the reading section was another problem that all of you have been putting forward. So right now, without wasting any time, let's start with The Invisible Man. Now, if you saw my last video, in that when I touched up the topic related to the novel, I told you people one thing, that you have to make a list of all the chapters. Okay, so when you make a list of all the chapters, this list will remain with you. This you can do it today. By today I mean today, that is right now, because when you make it, certain things will settle down in your mind, and this will remain ready with you every day. At least once you can go through it. Fine. Another thing that you will do is, when you are writing the chapter number and the chapter name, I repeat, chapter number and chapter name both have to be written, because I mentioned earlier and repeating again, the mention of the fact as it happened in chapter number 10 when Mr. Marvel visited Iping. The examiner immediately knows that the child is writing the answers. Child has not mugged it up from anyone. The child is creating the answer according to the question. So you'll do this first, numbering, name of the chapter, and the way for certain chapters I've done over here, you can do for all the chapters, so that your last minute revision can happen in a perfect manner. For every chapter, not more than 2 or 3, but at least 2 or 3 touch-up points, where you get a reminder that this chapter talks of this and this chapter talks of that. So this particular sheet should be there in your hand, and now the remaining few days you should go through it one by one. This will settle all your doubts related to the novel. If after this video you still have some doubts, do let us know. We'll try to upload whatever is required for your benefit at this point of time. Fine. So let's start with the first chapter. Now, as I already told you, the story oscillates in time. Okay. So this particular chapter is the middle of the action actually. Why middle of the action? Because when we reach here, it is here we come to know about the background of Griffin. Fine. So this particular part talks about that. From here till here, we know the present. From chapter 24 onwards, we come back again to the present. Okay. So this is the past being mentioned by Griffin when he's sitting in front of Kemp. So it is very important that you remember the strange man's arrival in Iping. He checks into Coach and Horses, where Mrs. Hall is really very happy to have him as a guest, as a person who's going to stay here, because it was off season. First. Second, this man did not ask for any discount, no bargaining he did. She was a good lady of business, so she was really very keen and eager and excited to have him. So he checks into, she takes him to the room, but the thing that troubles her about him is entire hidden identity, top to bottom. Dark glasses, mustaches, collars up, everything, gloves, which he refuses to remove even when he goes inside the room. Mrs. Hall wants to dry it for him, he refuses. Very strange. He wants food, but after food he wants Mrs. Hall to leave. When she comes in for a moment, she sees something which she is not able to perceive, and he immediately picks up the serviette to hide his face. Now we don't know anything about him, neither does the lady know. But later on during the conversation, he talks to her and she comes to know that maybe, he removes the hat, so she sees lot many bandages. And she thinks that maybe this fellow was in a very bad accident, and she has all the sympathies for the stranger. She does not even know his name when he has checked into the inn. Now, one thing that makes her happy is that he wants to stay longer, because he tells her that his luggage has to come from the station. He was very eager to get the luggage. She said that it's a bad weather and it cannot happen right now, you will have to wait for the next day. Now, let's come to the next chapter, Mr. Teddy Henfrey's first impressions. Teddy Henfrey, a clock jobber, a clock repairman, comes over there for a drink. Mrs. Hall sees he has a bag along with him. His bag is there. So she requests him that please go to the parlor room, the room which had been given to the stranger. He should go there and he should repair the parlor clock. She wanted to do this. Why? Because she wanted entry into the room. She wanted somebody else also to be there to get into conversation with the stranger, to be able to know more about him. So they do that, they enter, and details you can read in the novel, if not read till now the time is. Again, one repetitive question was, can we read the summary? Yes, you can read the summary, but pick up a summary which is a detailed one. You were going on asking me about the publication, which publication to be read. So you can take up any publication, but then don't stick to one at this point of time. You can find out summaries available at different places, different portals, or if you have question banks of CBSE or sample papers, everything has something or the other solved. So the point is, first go through different questions, a variety of questions. Second, go through summaries available at different portals or different sample papers or whatever you have in your hands, so that you don't stick to any one outline summary. Different publishers you will pick up, different aspects they would have emphasized. So that is what you have to grasp right now. Okay, so you can go through this summary, that what happens over here. Teddy Henfrey is being very suspicious about the stranger. So for repairing the clock, he opens the entire thing. He's taking too much time, and the stranger sees this. Teddy Henfrey tries talking to the stranger, but the stranger just snubs him down, tells him to quicken up the work and leave from there at the earliest possible. This particular thing made Teddy Henfrey feel offended. He immediately wrapped up the work, set the clock right and put it back and came out. But by doing this, what the stranger has done is, we just know him as a stranger right now, he has started the negativity in the mind of Teddy Henfrey. And from this chapter, the first ideology or the first philosophy regarding the stranger starts up. He thinks that Mrs. Hall over here had thought that he has been into a bad accident. This fellow thinks that the stranger is maybe a criminal who's done something wrong. He's escaping from the police, and all this is a way of hiding his identity. It is just a pretense under which he is hiding his real identity. He is hidden into the inn so that nobody can catch hold of him. So here the first philosophy starts, and this fellow poisons the ears of Mr. Hall regarding this, telling him that your wife has got a man into the inn. I'm sure she does not know the name of the person, and you should go and do this. You are a man, you should be more bossy and whatever. He comes, but obviously Mrs. Hall does not listen to him, and she snubs her husband. But somewhere deep down, she also has her own worries related to this person. The only comfort for Mrs. Hall is that he's paying money. That is the only comfort which does not let her speak anything against him. Now next is the 1001 bottles, the time when the luggage arrives. Okay, and when the luggage arrives, the person who gets it is Fairnside. Fairnside, the person who gets the luggage, has his own dog along with him. Fine. Apart from that, this is the chapter where he comes out, the stranger. He comes out of the inn. This is the first public appearance of this fellow in Iping. Till now, nobody has seen him. People have heard about him and heard him from the parlor down when they were there for a drink. They could hear him swearing and all. So this is the first time when he comes out. He steps down, and Mrs. Hall was expecting a lot of luggage to come, and everybody surprised. Entire Iping is there. So it's a small town. People are very curious to see anything that is happening around. So it's surrounded by people. And this cabman, he brings the luggage, and the luggage surprisingly is bottles and bottles and more bottles. You know, packed in boxes, packed between straw and whatnot, and it is all simply bottles and bottles. Now when this fellow comes down and he's there, all of a sudden the dog of Fairnside attacks him. When the dog attacks him, normally what happens is, if a stray dog comes towards us or tries to attack us, we will immediately catch hold of that part of the body saying, oh, what has happened, he's bit me or something. Even if the dog has not scratched you or has not bitten you, still the fear is that maybe, you know, he's done this, because that sensation becomes so strong, the sensation of fear, not of pain. We immediately are focused on that part of the body. In this case, the moment the dog attacked, his trouser got ripped apart, and rather than crying out in pain, he turns around and rushes back upstairs. That is one noticeable thing which is noticed by Fearenside, which he talks of later on. Now he has seen this fellow run back. Mr. Hall goes up to help him out, but then he's pushed back and he comes back, and then the luggage goes inside and he spreads everything, starts working. Okay, then we move on to the next chapter, which is Mr. Cuss, the medical practitioner of Iping. He comes to Coach and Horses to interview the stranger. Now another thing that happens is, when Mrs. Hall comes to the room, she sees the room all messed up. She objects about that, and this fellow says, the stranger tells her, you can bill me on that. Put it in my bill. Whatever damage I am causing, bill me on that. Mrs. Hall was okay with that. She kept on billing him, but she was very attached to her property. So she was feeling really very troubled. Now when Cuss has to come to interview him, Cuss, being the doctor, was very attracted listening about all the stories about his bandages and all that. Second thing is, his professional rivalry got aroused thinking about the 1001 bottles that had arrived in his luggage. So he thinks of coming to this place to talk to him. But in this chapter, you come to know about the different philosophies. This gets added to many more. I'll just give a touch up of it. You can go through the chapter or the summary to find out. One is Teddy Henfrey's philosophy of his being an escaped criminal. Second is, Fearenside has seen his trouser getting ripped apart, and what he saw was, now I hope everybody is aware of a little bit of the story, he was invisible. So when the trouser got ripped apart, he saw nothing. Hence he saw dark, blackness. What Fearenside concluded it to mean was that he is black. Okay, so his leg is black, but this was the only thing that was visible when he had checked into the Coach and Horses. His pink shiny nose was the only visible body part. So pink shiny nose because of the cold weather means he's a white man. So white man, but according to his philosophy, his leg was black. So Fearenside says that most probably the stranger is a piebald, half black, half white. According to him, like others, he could have gone to the village fairs and shown it off and earned money. But maybe he is not confident about that. So because of that, he wants to remain into hiding due to this reason. Another theory about him that comes up is that maybe he's an anarchist. He's working against the government. He's preparing explosives which gets connected with the bottles. So he's preparing explosives and he's going to use it against the government, maybe something of that kind. The women think that there is some supernatural element attached to this fellow, but all in all, the common thing is that nobody in Iping liked the stranger. Talking about him, listening about him, or having seen him in the late dark evening walking around here and there. One more important aspect about him is that he never visited a church on Sunday. So again, for them, that was an aspect of his being an anti-social element. Now comes up the case related to Cuss in this chapter. So Cuss, after all this is going on in the background, he comes to this place to visit this fellow. And over here, when he's talking to that to the stranger, whatever things happen, he throws a paper in the fireplace and he takes out his hand from his pocket. Without the gloves, the hand is, and so without the gloves means it is invisible. So Cuss has this kind of a courage. He shows the courage to ask, what is this? The handless sleeve. And this fellow tweaks his nose, which is really very difficult for Cuss to manage. He moves out from here shrieking and shouting, and the other fellow stranger is laughing like wild. Mrs. Hall hears it outside. We don't know about this. We come to know when Cuss rushes off to Mr. Bunting, the vicar. He goes, he's very hysterical, He tells him, oh, he tweaked my nose. What tweaked your nose? Nothing. There was no hand. So how did it get tweaked? But this fellow does not know, but he's telling Mr. Bunting. Bunting gives him a drink. He says, you are really very excited, just cool down your spirits. So that is where the chapter ends, that Mr. Bunting does not believe his story, considers it to be really very unbelievable. Now comes up the next chapter, the burglary at the vicarage. Actually, by this time, the stranger was falling short of money. He needed money, and this was his way of coming and stealing the money to be able to support his daily requirements. So over here, Mrs. Bunting, the wife of Mr. Bunting, was the first one. They were sleeping upstairs. She could hear something, some rustling sound in the study. So when it was repeated, she woke up Mr. Bunting. They're standing up on the stairs, wanting to come down, and they realized there is somebody, but the room is dark, they couldn't see. So then they heard the drawer being opened. The person is taking out, he's wanting to light the candle with the matchstick. So they wait over there, because the moment the matchstick will be lit and the candle will be lit, the room will be full of light. They'll come to know who their thief is. So all that happened, the candle is lit, but there is nobody. So they come down, Mr. Bunting with a poker stick in his hand, moving it here and there, but nothing happens. Then he hears some rustling sound, some clinking sound. He knows that the thief, the invisible thief, has hit across the treasury. They run towards the kitchen. From the kitchen, the back door was open. It slammed shut in front of them, and the fellow ran out with the money. So the husband and the wife, they sit down on the stairs thinking what to do. What report will they give that their money was stolen? By whom? By no one. If he could not believe Dr. Cuss, will anyone believe him? So that becomes a problem, a question. So here this chapter ends. Then we move on to the 6th chapter, the furniture that went mad. Now they were, Mr. Hall and Mrs. Hall, they were down the cellar. Mrs. Hall wanting to water down the beer, mixing water in the beer, diluting it just to earn more money. So to cover up the taste, that the taste should not get diluted, she sent Mrs. Hall Mr. Hall upstairs to get the sarsaparilla. When he went there to get it, he passed by the parlor room, the room of the stranger. He found surprisingly that the door is not locked. He just opens it and sees that the room was empty. The man was not there. The bandages, the clothes, everything was lying on the bed. So he immediately comes down. Remember, over here he tries to come and tell his wife what Teddy Henfrey had told him, but his wife snubs him. So some negativity was there within him, which he wants to settle now. He comes and he tells his wife and infuriates her and takes her along. When they are going upstairs, Mrs. Hall is up on the steps, Mr. Hall is down. Now they are going up in a very excited manner, and they heard a sneeze. Mrs. Hall thought he sneezed. He thought Mrs. Hall sneezed. But that was not the case. They heard the sound of the door also, but they misunderstood it to be done by the other one of them. Now they went to the room, and this is what Mrs. Hall also saw, that everything was lying scattered, and they are standing and thinking, what is this? And all of a sudden the clothes are caught hold of and they start flying in the air. But when they are flying in the air, Mrs. Hall could see that there is somebody who's holding them. The depression could be seen, but the visible hand was not there. Fine, that was scary enough. Now after that, the chair is picked up, the furniture starts flying around, so that they are out of this place. So through that they are actually shooed away from this room. Mrs. Hall is really hysterical now, because she was very attached to her property, to the things, to the inn, whatever. She's really very hysterical. They come out, and after that they call for Sandy Wadgers, they call for Huckster, all four of them sitting, the husband, wife and these two people sitting, discussing what to do. When they are out, the door was shut and banged and shut and locked from inside. Now they are feeling like breaking the door open and going inside, but then they stop, because in case the force inside, the invisible force inside, is not actually the stranger and somebody else, then breaking into the room would become something illegal done by them. So because of that, they are just sitting and they are discussing, and in the meantime the door opens and this fellow shouts at them and shouts at Mr. Hall basically, because they were preparing Mr. Hall to go inside and knock at the door and try to find out whatever is happening. He shouts at him and he just snubs them away. After that, the next chapter, early morning, he's been ringing bells for the breakfast and all. No breakfast came, nothing. He's been swearing. Everybody has been hearing the sound downstairs when they came for the drink. By this time, the news regarding the burglary at the vicarage has come, and obviously over here it gets connected, and the burglary that happened by an invisible person. Over here, somebody going out, somebody coming in, inside somebody is there. Who's there, they don't know. So somewhat connection has started getting developed. Now afterwards, this fellow, when he's really very hungry, comes out of the room, shouts for Mrs. Hall to come with the food. And why the food has not been served and all that. So finally she comes up with a tray, but on the tray is not the food but the unsettled bill. He says, why the food has not been given? She says, why the bill has not been paid? It is still pending. And he tells her that I told you the remittance is due, I'm waiting a remittance. And she says, no, nothing of that kind, because she is now very angry. And when she is talking to him, there are people downstairs observing the conversation. So she has to be victorious. She cannot let go of the situation from her own hands. So she says that she's not bothered about the remittance and all that. And all of a sudden this fellow says, oh, I think I have something in my pocket. Let me give you something. She now shows the courage to cross-question him. She asks him, where did the money come from? Till now you did not have any money. Where did the money come from? Tell me that. Why? Because of this doubt. She questions him. And then she has other questions. What is this? Why? Who came inside? How did that happen without the door being opened? How were you inside? Lot many questions she has. So many that ultimately he loses his temper, something which he keeps on doing very often. He's very fond of doing. So this is the time. The chapter says the unveiling of the stranger. Unveiling means the veil is lifted up. The cover is removed. He's the stranger. What is it about him that is weird, that is strange, that is keeping him at a distance from the others? So when she cross questions him again and again, does not accept the money that he was offering because he wanted to give now, because he's already stolen. She wants to know where the money has come from. He gets so annoyed. He says, you want to know, you want answers. Okay, wait, let me give you. What he does is, he does this and he does this. And just as a spontaneity of action, when he does this, she extends her hand and he puts that thing. She doesn't know what it is. She's looking at the hand and then she looks at his face. It's a black cavity over here. Then she sees and she shrieks and throws it away. It was that pink shiny nose, the only visible part of his body. She's taken aghast. She's not able to understand. And then he starts removing the bandages and the glasses and everything. So these people, they were thinking something weird would be there. Some hidden identity will come out. But the author says what came out was nothing. Plain and simple, nothing. So this is what they were not prepared for. He started removing things one after the other. So as much as he's removing, he's becoming invisible from that part of his body. So over here a lot of confusion happens. Then Constable Jaffers comes up. He's sitting and he's eating because he had not eaten till that time. So they see a headless figure sitting and eating something. So Jaffers comes with the other people. He says, head or no head, the warrant says that you have to be arrested. So whether he will be handcuffed or not, they argue on that. He says, okay, I'll go. But then again he starts removing the remaining clothes so that he becomes invisible, and he pushes the people here and pushes them there. He's out and they are not able to catch him. He attacks, he injures Jaffers before going. So when the chapter ends, Jaffers is lying on the floor and we don't know whether he's alive or not. Couple of chapters after that, we do come to know that Jaffers, though injured, did survive. Now this is the shortest chapter of the novel, In Transit. Here we come across the naturalist, the amateur naturalist, Mr. Gibbons. He is lying down in the open, in the garden, and he hears some swearing noises, coughing, sneezing. He wakes up, there's nobody around, and he's afraid. He starts running back towards Iping. This is very ironical. He's afraid and he runs towards Iping so that he's away from some confusion. But right now Iping is where utter confusion is there. So he's rushing back towards Iping, and this is it about it. But this chapter tells in transit, the information regarding the stranger is in transit. It has started to be on the move now. Now it will keep spreading on. So till this chapter, okay, till this chapter we knew him as the stranger. Now when the unveiling happened, the author says that from this chapter, from now onwards, we'll refer to him as the invisible man. So after this, the identity of this person is the invisible man. Now we move on to chapter 9, which is about the tramp, Mr. Thomas Marvel. He is a typical tramp. He is sitting with two pairs of boots, looking at them, discussing about them, which one to be worn and not. And suddenly somebody starts talking about boots to him, and he's, without even seeing who it is, he continues with the conversation. During the conversation, he just turns like this to see the shoes worn by the person talking to him. But to his surprise, no shoes, no feet. And then he sees there is nobody. So Thomas Marvel, who was drunk, he says, oh, I'm hallucinating. Because I'm drunk, I'm hallucinating. But the person standing behind him was our very own invisible man. He tries to tell him, no, it is me. Marvel does not believe. So he starts throwing stones at Marvel. And already I discussed this aspect in the previous video, just repeating very quickly again. The invisible man wants to lay his hands on Marvel, because remember, he left from Iping, but he did not bring anything along. Everything is back there. He cannot go back to get it, because the moment he holds the things will be visible. And now, because everybody knows there is something called as an invisible man, they'll all be very alert about such a thing. So he wants some visible partner who becomes a carrier, a person who brings his things from there. So he tells him, he throws stones at him, and Marvel touches him to see whether he's there or not. Marvel is really very surprised. So he lays his hands on Marvel, because he knows Marvel is such a dumb person, cannot double cross me, will listen to the instructions, can be terrorized and can be used whatever way I want. So he tells Marvel, he says, an invisible man is a man of power. So you be there with me, you will be benefited some way or the other. Now the next 3 chapters are somehow connected. Marvel's visit to Iping till the time the invisible man loses his temper, because the author tells you certain things here which he does not clear. Chapter 11, he clears all those things, that what exactly happened. Here Marvel reaches Iping. The author does not say Marvel reaches Iping. He says that Iping had just now settled down after the confusion that happened in chapter 7. So they had just settled, and that, Whit Sunday celebration was happening, and there were stalls and everything everybody started forgetting of the chaos, because whatever happened inside the inn was viewed by very few. Others just heard it, so they rubbished it, thinking that this was just, a goofed up story. They continued with the celebrations. Now when Marvel comes to Iping, he's not confident, he seems to be looking here, looking there, and we come to know, because of the physical description of Marvel given by the author, it matches the description given in the previous chapter. Now Huckster was sitting in his shop and observing this fellow, feeling that there is something wrong. And the people had not seen the invisible man. For the people, invisible man could be anyone, and for them, maybe he was invisible then, he is back into his visible form. So first feeling is that maybe this is the visible form of the invisible man. It could be anything. Now Marvel comes, goes towards Coach and Horses, goes up, opens the parlor room door, shuts it, comes back down, goes inside, takes a drink, then goes in the backyard and stands and waits there. All this is being seen by Huckster. He waits there. There is a thud sound. Something falls. He picks it up and he runs out. When he does that, Huckster feels that maybe he is a thief. So he comes towards him, starts following him, runs after him. When he runs after him, all of a sudden something happens. Huckster trips and he gets knocked over. He falls really very badly. The chapter ends over there. Now in the Coach and Horses, in this chapter, the author takes us back inside. He says, what you saw over here, let me just tell you what exactly happened. When Marvel came, Marvel entered Coach and Horses. When he entered Coach and Horses, he went upstairs. He opened the parlor room door. There was somebody inside. Who was that somebody? Already the Iping people had placed Dr. Cuss and Mr. Bunting inside. Considering them to be the learned, educated people of Iping, put them in the room of the person, the stranger who was now the Invisible Man, to see what all was there, the books, the bottles, what was he up to. The two of them are there, and we the readers are able to understand that they are not getting anything, because his diaries were written in a cipher, in a code which they could not decipher. But they did not admit it also. They tried to read it and blaming it on the eyesight. Mr. Bunting says the eyesight is really failing me. So in this entire time period, the door opened and they immediately said it's a private room, and the person at that end was Marvel. He says, oh, I'm so sorry. He shut the door and he goes down. But what was this? This was just the opening of the door on the pretext that I came here by mistake, was a way of allowing the Invisible Man inside. He comes, this fellow shuts the door, says sorry, goes down. Now when the Invisible Man comes inside, sees the two of them with his things, Bunting and Cuss, he loses his temper, catches hold of their neck, bangs them, beats them, shouts at them, and then he wraps up things. He throws the bundle down, which Marvel was already there standing. He picked it up. So Marvel picked up and he started running. Here this fellow gives beating and all to Cuss and Bunting, and there Huckster had started running after Marvel. So it is this fellow who has reached there. He trips Huckster, and people just see Huckster falling down, getting knocked over. So after that, in this chapter, he loses his temper in Iping. Inside, he beats them black and blue and runs off with their clothes and everything. And when he's out in the open, he trips Huckster. Huckster falls down badly. He smashes the window panes. He cuts off the telegraph cables and all that. This is the first chapter where he leaves proof of his anger. In chapter 7, only a handful people had seen, so they could forget. They could comfortably forget. But it is here where in the open, entire Iping, because of the celebration, everybody was there. Whatever happened, happened in the open. To the extent that the proofs could be covered, they could be put in the paper, and everywhere the news spread regarding the Invisible Man. That means now it has, with valid proof, now people cannot rubbish it. People have to believe it. So it has started traveling from here, will go across to people, where the news will mention Constable Jaffers, Dr. Cuss, Mr. Bunting, all the learned people who have given their verdict or who have been associated with the story. So this story cannot be baseless kind of a thing spoken by illiterate people or the people of the small town or village or things like that, but something which has valid proof to it. So the story moves further. Now chapter 13, we have Marvel with all the money and the diaries along with him of the Invisible Man. He discusses his resignation. In this chapter, we start seeing shades of changes coming up in him. He has already tried to skip out of the hands of the Invisible Man. He's being scolded for that, and he says, no, I did not know the way, and this and that. But there are thoughts. He discusses his resignation. He wants to break away from this person because he does not want to be used by him. So that is what the 13th chapter talks about. We move on to the 14th chapter at Port Stowe. Now over here there is this sailor who has the newspaper in his hands. He is reading the news related to the things done by the Invisible Man, the reports and everything, and Marvel gets into the conversation with him. Now one thing is there, the sailor over here looks at Marvel, a tramp. But he's surprised, such a tramp, beggar-like person. There is clinking sound of money from his pockets. He's got diaries. It seems to be a learned person, but does not because of his appearance. And Marvel, the author tells us, has started getting the feel of the money. He feels the money in his pocket again and again. So these two things, the diaries and the sound of the money, attracts the sailor towards Marvel. They start discussing. Marvel wants to add on. He's very excited because he is the only first-hand information about the Invisible Man. He wants to talk about it. But what happens is, when he's about to start off, he was looking here, there, thinking maybe the Invisible Man is not around. When the sailor has given his bit of the conversation and is now wanting Marvel to start, Marvel immediately shrieks in pain, and the sailor asks him what happened. He says toothache, and he holds his ear. The sailor is really very annoyed because he made him speak, but then himself, when it was his turn to add on to his part, he did not do it and he went away. But the author makes us understand that he is being pushed forward. There are jerks. With jerks he is speaking, and we the readers hear somebody saying, say it's a hoax, Invisible Man is a hoax. And Marvel says Invisible Man is a hoax, and he goes away. The sailor does not like it. Now, a couple of days after that, there have been incidents of money being robbed from here and there, people seeing currency flying here and there. Now, then few days after this, when the sailor reads more about this person, he now realizes the incident that had happened along with that tramp where he behaved in such a fishy manner. It is now the sailor realizes, somehow I was really very close to the Invisible Man. He was right next to me, but I missed the chance. Then we move on to the next chapter, The Man Who Was Running. This and the next in the Jolly Cricketers, two chapters which are linked. Here Marvel tries to escape away. He's running with the stuff of the Invisible Man, and he says, oh, the Invisible Man is coming, the Invisible Man is coming. And the people who are now aware. Now what happens is, the Invisible Man, as we come to know later on, but let me just add this little part over here. He was invisible. He had vanished into thin air. But he was a tangible experience. He was there. You could touch him, you could feel him. So because of that, when he is running, the padding sound of the bare feet could be heard. He is running, he is breathless, so that breathless sound can be heard. And now people are all ears. When they know there can be something like an Invisible Man, there are no questions, there are no doubts, because common people believe things very easily. They have believed it. He is running and he says, oh, the Invisible Man is coming, and everybody is on the alert now. Now over here, this is the chapter where gets introduced to us Dr. Kemp. He, from his window, is seeing this. He sees somebody. This somebody is Marvel. He sees somebody running saying the Invisible Man is coming, and he, being a man of science, cannot believe on such thing. So he ridicules the kind of ideology or the mindset or the psyche of a common man. And he doesn't believe it though, but then the other people who could hear the padding sound and the breathlessness kind of sound, they started rushing back to their own houses to shut them from inside so that this fellow cannot enter. Now Marvel, he enters the Jolly Cricketers, a tavern. He enters this place. Why? Because he wants safety. He wants the doors to be shut. The door is shut, but then the barman, the cabman and the policeman and all those people who are there, he tries to tell them. And later on they realize that this fellow could have entered from the backside where one door was left open, which he did do. So a lot of confusion over here, but when this fellow enters, he catches hold of Kemp, because Kemp catches hold of, Marvel, because Marvel has been caught hold of. Okay, Marvel has been caught hold of, they know where his hand is. So because of this, they are able to catch hold of him, and he's even shot at. There's a bullet that is fired. Over there, Kemp is able to hear the sound of the bullet, but then he's like, what is this happening? But then he's shot at, and because of that, he starts rushing out. There is a reason behind that, which he tells later on. We'll discuss it later. So he rushes out. Now we reach the house of Kemp. Over here, he hears the sound of the bullet. When he hears the sound of the bullet, he is surprised that what can it be? But then he continues with his work. But after that, 1 hour after that, his doorbell rings. When his doorbell rings, the servant goes to answer it. he is very keen to know who has come up. The servant comes back, he asks, who was it? The servant says it was just a runaway ring, somebody rang the bell and went away. He's okay, he keeps on working till late in the night. So after that, I think around 2 o'clock, he goes to his room to sleep, but feels thirsty, comes out, and again when he is going back, on the linoleum flooring, he saw something. He bent down, touched it and saw that it was blood. Then the doorknob, and inside his room he realized the sheet was torn. Then the bedclothes were as if somebody has been sitting on them. He's surprised. So it is here that his visitor comes up, and when he's surprised, what is this and all that, and it is the invisible man obviously who has come inside. He's injured, he's there. The invisible man recognizes him. He says, we were together at the university, you were my senior, I was your junior. And Kemp still is not willing to believe. But anyways, this fellow gives him proof enough, and he says, first give me some clothes. He wears the night clothes of Kemp, and then he's sitting in front of him, and Kemp sees the night clothes without anyone inside. But it was as if, there is somebody, no hands, no head, somebody's there. He's really very hungry. He wants Kemp to give him food, and it is here that we see him eating for the first time. Why he avoided eating publicly? Because food would be visible. Till the time the food does not get digested, it would be visible. So he's eating, he's drinking, and he's even sitting and smoking. So when he's smoking, there is no head, it is just the night clothes. But he's smoking, so the smoke is giving an outline to the entire mouth and throat, which we are able to see. And Kemp is really very, very surprised what this entire thing is. This fellow tells him, I am Griffin, I was there with you, and this is a kind of thing that I hit across. I was working on it, I was able to achieve this. Kemp again is not able to believe, but this fellow says, I'll tell you how it happened. So here he gets his food, he gets to talk to Kemp. Kemp wants to know many things. He doesn't tell right now. He tells him, let me be comfortable enough, then I'll tell. Here he puts one idea in the mind of Kemp, that he wants to sleep. He's very tired. Kemp, he decides to sleep in Kemp's room. He tells Kemp, I want to sleep peacefully. I don't like being caught. Trying to tell him that don't report against me. And then he repents. He says, oh my God, I put the idea in your mind. So anyways, now in this chapter, he has to sleep, and he again warns Kemp about that. Kemp says, I've given you my word, nothing of that kind will happen. He promises that he will not tell anyone about his presence over here. Now in this case, he sleeps. Kemp is really very troubled now. His mind is not at peace. He goes down again, picks out all the newspapers and journals of the previous days, starts reading each and every news about the invisible man, about the trouble that happened in Iping and the trouble that started forward from Iping. He keeps on reading and reading and reading till early morning, and morning he sends his servant to get the latest newspapers. So the latest newspapers covered the previous day's report regarding the Jolly Cricketers. It even had the verdict of Marvel in that. So he reads that. This entire thing makes him understand that this man is hardly human. And he says, such an inhuman person, he's free like air in the room above. Something needs to be done. He thinks of his promise, and then he realizes, no, nothing against humanity. So he picks up the envelope, writes a letter for Colonel Addy and sends it across, because he wants Colonel Addy to come here with a couple of people. Now when he's doing this, he hears the sound of some chair being tumbled over, a glass being smashed, and he rushes. So here when we reach, it is now this chapter onwards, chapter 19 onwards till 23, that he keeps on telling about the past. So first of all, he's hungry and breakfast and whatever. So after that, he starts telling about his own self. It is here that he tells about this. This chapter is important because the reference of Oliver, his teacher, comes up. Okay. It is in this chapter that we come to know. He talks to Kemp about whatever in physics, refraction and this and that. He talks about many things not important for you from the exam point of view. So just very quickly, why this chapter is important, I'll tell you. One is the mention of Oliver. Oliver, who was his teacher, he did not, whatever he was doing, he did not want that whatever I am going to do, and is going to become famous by my name. I don't want him to take credit because he considers him to be a sneaking professor. He does not want Oliver to take any kind of credit for whatever work he is doing. So towards the end of this chapter, the reference of Oliver comes important for a question. So at times, once it came up as a question and children were like, who was Oliver in the entire novel? So just telling you, Oliver was the professor of Griffin when he was there at college. So that is one important thing. Second important thing is when he was working about this entire thing, the research he was doing, he was falling short of money. He says, I saw my father had money. He had taken loan from somebody. He had to return that. So I stole the money. Father lost the money that he had to return. So without realizing what happened, the father shot himself and committed suicide. This is something which makes Kemp feel really very surprised that he is very comfortable. There is no remorse, there is no guilt, there is nothing of cracking of a voice or something that he became the reason for his father's death. Nothing. He got money. Now at the house in Great Portland Street, it is here we come to know he is not sorry for his father. He goes for the final rituals. He goes there, but he says, I was not disturbed. He did not even once try to cover up the father's honesty that he wanted to return the money. Nothing. He didn't want to clear the doubts related to the father's integrity. And he goes, he says, I went because I had to. That is it. Now, after that, he takes up this place. He's into this new room that he has taken on rent. Here he starts with his research work. First thing he researched on was a piece of wool which became invisible, and you need to remember because children generally tend to forget. First he experimented on a piece of wool, it became invisible. After that he experimented on a cat. It was a painful experience. The cat gave out cries of pain. And he says the only thing that was left out where the experiment failed was the cat became invisible, only the claws and the pigment of the eyes that remained visible. Now after that, now in this entire chapter lot many things happen. There is this old lady in the neighborhood who hears the cries of the cat. There were vivisection rules coming up in London at that time. It was not allowed, it was becoming illegal. Now these people thought, the landlord and this old lady, that he's maybe experimenting on the cat. So they came to his house once or twice to check it up. He became really very annoyed and he just barged them out of the house, shouted at them. So he knew that now he is in trouble. The landlord is going to turn me out. He does come with the eviction notice. This fellow, out of some kind of disturbed state of mind, he himself took up the entire thing. He did the experiment on himself, and now he says, I realized why the cat was crying out so much. It was a painful experience, and he started becoming invisible. Again, the way in the case of the cat, two things had remained. He says, I didn't become invisible all of a sudden. I started fading away slowly and steadily. So when he did it on himself, after that, before he leaves the place, he sends his luggage from there and he puts the house on fire out of retaliation and also to cover up if he's leaving any clues behind for the others. He was very, very protective about whatever work he was doing, very secretive about that, burnt the entire house, and he says the house was insured, so no problem about that. Now when he comes out in the open, this chapter number 21 in Oxford Street, when he is out over here, in the beginning he is feeling himself to be on top of the world, making, troubling people here, doing something there, moving out in the streets. He is enjoying himself. But another thing is, he is out in the open. The author is trying to bring up one very painful fact in front of us, which he will take some time to realize. Basic requirement of a human being: food, clothing, shelter. He burnt his shelter. He has to get rid of the clothes to utilize his invisibility, and he has to get rid of his clothes to continue with his invisibility. Shelter he has already burned, and food he cannot eat publicly because food, he is invisible, but food that he is eating will be visible. So he is deprived of these three basic things. Now he starts facing the difficulty. Then in this chapter he enters the emporium. Okay, he enters Omniums, and over here it's as if, you know, small child in a very fantasy kind of a world he has reached, which is full of toys and comfort and food and all that. So he waits till the store is shut. When it is shut, he is able to eat, he is able to sleep. But one thing that happened is physical comfort he was able to get, and he thought of stealing things away from here in the morning when the store will open. So he sleeps over here, but something very strange happened. He dreams of being pushed into the grave. Father had died, had been put into the grave. He dreams as if people are pushing him into the grave. He wakes up, it's morning time, there are other people. He tries to escape from there, but people are able to catch hold of him. So again he has to shed down his clothes and then only come out in the open. Fine. Now we come across in the next chapter in Drury Lane. It is here now the author comes up with the disadvantages of his invisibility. In the London cold, he was out stark naked, no clothes, and feeling cold, but then there was no way, because wearing clothes would be like revealing his invisibility. People would come to know he's invisible and still they would be able to see him because of the clothes. He cannot eat, and then another thing is he's invisible for the eyes, but he's a tangible experience. So if he walks on a muddy path, the footsteps will be visible. If snowfall happens, snow will settle on him. After a passage of few days, dirt will settle on him. So these are different ways in which he will become visible to people. Now over here, he's able to understand one thing. When he was there in Omniums, he realized he saw many wigs and noses. So he realizes that now to be able to survive this entire thing, to overcome the disadvantages, till the time I don't get the reverse of the process of invisibility, I have to do something. So he decides to hide himself underneath this garb of wearing something. So then he reaches this place, the place which is a costume shop. The owner is there, he's eating his food. This fellow keeps on standing observing the fellow eating food, but the shop owner is really very aware of any sound happening around, and he gets up twice or thrice. But somehow the invisible man reaches the place where the things were upstairs, and the owner follows him there. Now the owner had come to know that there is something fishy happening. What he did was he hit the owner, he gagged him, tied it up, put him in a sag, feet towards the outside, and then tied him so that he cannot break out from there. And towards the end of this chapter, it is really very important. The dialogue of Dr. Kemp versus what Griffin was saying. And certain lines of Kemp in these chapters are really very important. Now these two chapters coming up, because in chapter 23 and chapter 25, certain words of Kemp are very important, because straight away within inverted commas they can come up for justification, for explanation of some kind. Okay, now over here when he says I did this and this and this, so it is then that Kemp says, oh my God, Griffin, what about the common conventions of humanity? That man was in his very own home. In today's day, in London, how could you do this? What about the common conventions of humanity? And our very own Griffin, he says, are for the common people. Common conventions of humanity are for the common people. Means he considers himself to be absolutely uncommon, very different from the others. So the very striking difference between the two of them comes up over here, and it is here that Kemp has started drawing that line, that yes, you know, that merger between the two of them can never happen. He did give a word to Griffin, but he has all the reasons to betray Griffin, because keeping his word with Griffin would mean betraying humanity, betraying the world. So he decides whatever he has to do, and in between Kemp, we'll see, is very careful keeping a watch outside because he's now waiting for Colonel Addy and his men to come. So when his men will be there, this fellow should not get any hint, otherwise he will try running away from here. Now that does happen when Griffin is talking. In the meantime, it happens that he is able to hear the men. But before that, yes, chapter 24, the plan that failed. Now we come back to the present time. And now Griffin tells Kemp, he says, earlier my plan was to go to some warmer country and over there because then clothes will not be a necessity for him. So remaining invisible, he will start working on the reversal of the invisibility that he had already attained, so that according to his own will he could be invisible and he could be visible both. And here the discussion regarding Marvel comes up, that he double crossed me, and it is here we come to know that from the Jolly Cricketers, now Marvel has got himself imprisoned. He's got himself put behind bars because Marvel has come to know Invisible Man is invisible but is physically there. So he cannot harm me if I am behind the bars. He gets himself put behind the bars. When he is behind the bars, he is safe. Why? Because if he comes, if he wants to break into the prison, he has to be visible to the others. The visible means if he will try to do anything, any physical force he will apply, that will be seen by the others. So he is very safe inside the prison. So we come to know about that over here. So now Griffin tells Kemp, he says, because Marvel double crossed me, took away all the money, took away all my books. Now he says that I have now realized, he says, I came to your house. That was by chance. I came over here to spend the night over here, but now he says I plan to remain over here. I have now realized that my knowledge, my power is incomplete without your support. You will be my visible partner now, and together we will start a reign of terror. We are going to make the people afraid and scared and whatnot. But it is here that Kemp tells him, he says, why wage a war against humanity? He says, take the world, or at least take your own people, your own country into this. Many people together, many heads together would mean something beyond what you could yourself alone achieve. But Griffin is totally against this point. He is not wanting to do anything. Now in these chapters, one more thing, one very important thing that Griffin tells to Kemp is the drawbacks of his invisibility. He says, I'm there. I've just made myself invisible from the human eye. And he says this tissue that I've made invisible is going to remain like this till the time I am there, till the time I'm alive. If I die, the tissue also will come back. The way it has faded away, the same way it will start getting visible. So that is one thing. Another thing he tells Kemp is that his blood is visible. If he gets hurt, the blood is visible, as Kemp was also able to see it. So now coming back to this thing, remember I told you Jolly Cricketers, he was shot at. So he left Marvel, ran away. Why? Because if blood is visible, bleeding happens here, people would be able to catch hold of him. So he ran off to a place of safety. So here he tells Kemp that my blood will be visible, and anything happens, he will start bleeding. And one more thing, he says dogs could sniff me. Dog could sniff and find me out. And these things are there in the hands of Kemp now. So when they are talking, this fellow is able to hear the sound of somebody coming. It is Colonel Addy with his men. So this fellow again sheds down the clothes and he escapes, but he is really very annoyed with Kemp, because Kemp is the only person in whom he confided. The first ever person with whom he spoke in detail at length about his invisibility. He rushes away from there. Now the hunting of the Invisible Man. This is the chapter where Kemp tells Colonel Addy about all the drawbacks of invisibility. He tells Colonel Addy that the entire place should be spread with powdered glass so that he starts bleeding. He tells Colonel Addy to spread the word that everybody should keep the doors and windows shut. This man should not be able to get anything to eat or drink, so that his strength diminishes. If he will be able to eat, if he will be able to drink, the strength will come back. So that should not be allowed. Now when he tells all these things, And it is in this chapter that Kemp turns out to be the alter ego of H.G. Wells, something which H.G. Wells, read the first few lines, the second paragraph, it tells you about Kemp. The words of Kemp are really very important. Colonel Addy shows that, you know, spreading of powdered glass and all is very unsportsmanlike, should not be done. But Kemp tells him, he says, that man is hardly human. The blood of humanity be on his head. He's just on a run outside. He can harm anyone. So you have to do this. So they lay the plans for this fellow to be caught by the instructions of Kemp. Kemp has given all the instructions that these things need to be done. Now Wicksteed murder case comes up when Griffin is out. Nobody knows where he is. And all of a sudden people come to know about this person having died. The situation over there makes the people understand that Wicksteed, who was otherwise a very gentleman, he was maybe, you know, he became inquisitive. He saw a poker stick flying in the air. Poker stick which was held by the invisible hand. So he saw that, he got attracted towards it, went forward to see. This man was already hungry and painful and very depressed and having, you know, made to feel cheated and all. He let loose all his anger on Mr. Wicksteed. The pathetic way in which this fellow died is as if, you know, when we say excess of everything is bad, Griffin was always doing negative. He was never ever in a good mood. Always he was in a troublesome mood, or his tempers were soaring high. But what he did here was as if this was the last bit of negativity that he could do to cause harm to anyone, and now all that is going to fall back on him. So now the siege of Kemp's house, he sends a letter to Kemp saying that I'm going to come, I'm going to kill you. So you are going to be my first victim. What Kemp does is he sends the message across to Colonel Addy that he will come here to catch hold of me, so I will be the bait. Because of me, you will be able to catch hold of the invisible man, catch hold of Griffin. So he sends a note written to Colonel Addy. Later on, Colonel Addy comes here and tells him that your servant was taken over by Griffin. He's taken the note, so he knows your plan. So he will be here any moment now. He does come, starts shattering the window panes and all that. So a lot of confusion happens over here also. When he is here, he finally breaks into the house and Colonel Addy has been injured and most probably killed by him outside. There are officers inside. He comes in with an axe. He's holding the axe. Due to that, and he's trying to attack them with that. One of the officers hits him hard over here, and it is some cracking sound comes and the axe falls down. And it is then that Kemp now thinks that nothing can happen here. He runs out in the open, wanting to do something else, something so that this fellow can be caught, because now over here he cannot be caught. So this fellow leaves his house, runs out, and he runs towards the house of Mr. Heelas, his neighbor. And Mr. Heelas, when he came out, he looked at the condition of Kemp's house. What has happened? Totally shut. Everything shut, but then shattered also. And Kemp running. So he went inside, shut his door and did not allow Kemp inside. This is a negative thing that comes up regarding Heelas, that he did not turn out to be a good neighbor. Now it is in this chapter that now what Kemp does is he starts running out on the road. First he thinks of going to the police station, but then he thought of letting that plan away and he starts running in the other direction throughout, and that powdered glass and everything came on the way, and he's able to hear the padding sound of the feet of the invisible man, Griffin. Now here the author tells us that it was as if the entire town is empty, all doors, windows shut by the order of Kemp. So because of Kemp, everybody is inside and poor fellow Kemp himself is outside being chased madly by Griffin. Now he moves towards a place where there were certain navvies who were working with spades and all on the roadside, manual laborer and illiterate people and all that, they are working. So when he rushes towards that side, these people, the laborers are able to see, the navvies are able to see, they come. He is manhandling Cuff. Griffin is manhandling Kemp. So when he is doing that, again, because of the way he's clutching Kemp and harming him and hitting him, they are able to understand where he is. So on total estimation, they started hitting him. They hit him to such an extent that this fellow fell down, and Kemp has to stop them. Kemp, and they tell him that he must be trying to just, act smart, be fooling us. Kemp says, no, just wait. Kemp tries to check and he realizes that the man is no more there. But the very fact why the author made this as the ending, why did he get the invisible man killed by the navies? Trying to tell us what I was trying to tell you here. Excess of everything is bad. When he goes beyond the limit of humanity, when he becomes a total antagonist to the entire human race, it is here the author tries to make us understand this is not what science should be. This is not what should be the advancement of science and technology. If he misused it, what did the author do? No rocket science required to kill him, to bring down his force. Simple, illiterate people working on the roadside with normal spades, they were able to kill him. Finished. Where did his science go? So science gone wrong ends in a pathetic manner. This chapter becomes important because when he dies, okay, remember what he had told Kemp, I have made my tissue invisible till the time I am alive. So now he is dead, the way he faded away. Now he is coming back. He is becoming visible from a faint kind of a view. So he starts becoming a stronger view, and this, the end of the novel, end of this last chapter, chapter 28, is the time when for the first time we see Griffin in front of us. The first view of Griffin is seen in this particular chapter when he's coming up in pathetic figure who's died and who has been, covered up by a sheet by all of them. Then we move on to the epilogue. The epilogue is important. Why? To make us understand that the entire information that he had grabbed together in those diaries, the money and everything, it is used, or I would say misused, by Marvel. This epilogue brings out the true self of Marvel. That is what comes up in front of us. Marvel opens an inn in the name of the Invisible Man. He earns money in that inn. He earns extra money by telling stories about the Invisible Man. Anyone who wants to know about him, he keeps on telling stories, which, who knows, they are all made up stories, because if he is earning money every day, a new story has to be told. If we read the novel, if we know the story, we know he didn't get to spend that much time with the Invisible Man. So that is one aspect of it. Another thing is, people have been, the money that the Invisible Man stole remained with him, because nobody could prove how much money, which money is of whose. So that money remained with him and he used it. Then they have been asking him about the diaries, the books of the Invisible Man, which he says, I don't have, he threw them away somewhere. I don't know where the books are. But the author says that on Sunday late in the night, what he does is, he just closes all, the inn is closed, all the doors are closed, everything. He draws the curtains, looks here, looks there, that nobody is watching him. So what he does is that he goes, opens this drawer, takes out the other thing, takes out a box, and then he comes out with 3 diaries, which the name is not given to us, but we come to know these are those diaries that belonged to the Invisible Man. So he does not know what is written. He just rubs his hands over that, trying to understand that maybe some fine day I'll be able to understand this, and if I will, then what will I be able to do? Fantasies of a human mind. And last paragraph, towards the end, the author makes us understand that these diaries, which were being looked for by Kemp, have never been able to reach him, or he has not been able to reach here, and they will remain here probably till the time Marvel has hold of them. Ending it over here, making us understand excess of knowledge also is bad. That is why, had these diaries gone into the hands of Kemp, who knows, maybe the person who was such a wonderful person here puts his life at risk. Maybe getting the diaries, his mind also would have got corrupt, the way it happened in the case of Griffin. So it's better hidden away from him with a person who can never use these things. So this is where the novel comes to an end. So I think we'll end this session over here. I'm ready for more inputs from your side. Another video we will upload regarding writing section and note making. Anything else, please let me know. And now it's time to go head over heels with English. Let's at least target around 95 in the paper coming up. All the best, all of you. Thank you so much.